Coming up on today's San Francisco 49ers Report is defensive coordinator Steve Wilks on the hot seat. Richard Sherman just tearing apart his scheme on his podcast. Kyle Shanahan having a heart-to-heart with Steve Wilks given the Niners' struggles. Is Shanahan himself overrated? We're going to take a look at this dubious Shanahan trend when he's trailing in the fourth quarter and determine, is he an overrated coach? Is he elite? Or is that something to be concerned about? All coming your way. First, though, we're moving our way toward 100,000 subscribers. We're 679 people away. And once we get there, YouTube is sending us that silver plaque. If you're looking for Niners shows with news and analysis every single day, we have you covered. Just lock us in and hit that sub button. And with that, let's dive in. And today's show is presented by Roan. I'm wearing their commuter polo, and the commuter collection has everything that you need as we transition to fall to spice up your wardrobe. And a great deal for the faithful, 20% off your order at roan.com/chatsports. Make sure you plug in the promo code chatsports. Why I love Roan and their products. High quality men's clothing, holiday season coming up, by the way. Breathable and stretchable fabric. No need to go to the dry cleaner because the more you wear these shirts, the more that the wrinkles release with the wrinkle release technology. Anti-odor technology as well because you don't want to be stinky around your homies or a significant other. And the versatility to everything that the commuter collection has. Dress shirts, polos, pants, as well as shorts. So one more time, 20% off. Code ChatSports at roan.com/chatsports. We'll put that link down below in the comment section as well as in the description of this video. So on today's show, plenty to talk about with Steve Wilks, and it's a good talking point and good talking points to uncover and discuss given the Niners are on the bye week right now, and this defense has really come under fire because the Niners on a 3-game losing streak. It's a midseason crisis, and there's a dark cloud hovering over this organization right now considering how they've been playing, but how they started the year, looking like the best all-around team in football off to that 5-0 start and have not won a game since dispatching the Cowboys 42-10 in primetime. So I want to begin with what Richard Sherman said about Steve Wilks. He's a defensive mind that I respect. Richard Sherman is a future Hall of Famer potentially, multi-time All-Pro, one of the best cornerbacks in the game for some great defenses with Seattle and, of course, San Francisco. So on his podcast, it's called, fittingly, the Richard Sherman Podcast on Colin Cowherd's Volume Network, he was asked what changes and adjustments he would make to the San Francisco 49ers defense going into the bye week. And maybe this bye week is coming at a good time. Allow San Francisco to kind of patch things up a little bit, make some adjustments, and make some changes. And what Richard Sherman said, quote, "We're going back to the fundamentals. We're going back to the things that we do well. We're not running man on first and second down like the Niners have been doing. Not a big fan of it. I don't think they're sound. We're going to mix it up. Our defensive line is going to have to get hot like they've been doing over the last couple of years," he meant, for you to take them out of that and take them out of their strengths, for you to sit there and run gains and stunts and do all these other things instead of just ears back, get after the quarterback like these guys have specialized in the last 3-4 years. It's weird, and I think Kyle Shanahan has had enough. I think this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and I think that there will be changes next week. I don't think Sherman is talking about San Francisco firing Steve Wilks. It's very rare that a Super Bowl contender will fire their defensive coordinator at the halfway point of the season, but if changes are not made and these struggles do continue, the temperature beneath Steve Wilks, that seat is going to get really, really hot. And I think when you watch this football team over the last couple of weeks, there are clearly and obviously changes that need to be made. This defensive line not getting to the quarterback. That's part scheme, and part of that blame is on Steve Wilks. It's also part personnel not winning their matchups. You're paying $92+ million to Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and Javon Hargrave. They're struggling. You traded for Randy Gregory. You now traded for Chase Young. And some of these individual players along that defensive line are not winning some of their matchups. Again, part scheme, part personnel. And a lot of the talk about this defensive line has been that they're not matched up with the secondary as far as the coverages meeting what the front end is doing. For instance, like Sherman said, if you're in it running twists and stunts, it's going to develop a little bit slower as far as that play goes, and you're not going to be able to pressure the quarterback as quickly. And on the back end, if you're not covering up in that secondary to kind of match what the defensive line is doing, that's why we've seen some of these lapses. And that's why we've seen Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow just be basically perfect and unconscious on some of these third downs. Not sacking the quarterback, and then your coverage isn't holding up, and it's not matching up with what you're doing on the front side of that defense. It's going to get leaky on that back end, and that's what we've seen with San Francisco. And again, I trust Richard Sherman's evaluation here because he knows ball. At the same point, going back to the players just doing their job, Steve Wilks has to do his job better. But the players have to do their job better as well. Two things can be true at the same time. Like when you look at the Niners' defensive statistics at this point of the season, they're actually not all that bad in Steve Wilks' first year as defensive coordinator. They're giving up 17.5 points per game. That's number 5 in the NFL. 315 yards per game, number 9 in the NFL. Points per play at number 4. Yards per play at number 11. Third down conversion percentage for opposing offense, 21%, not great. Fourth down percentage, number 17. Red zone scoring percentage, number 23. But opposing touchdowns per game, 1.8. So while teams are getting into the red zone quite often, they're not scoring all that many touchdowns. Those numbers are not awful. Now, they're a drop-off from last year because San Francisco had the number 1 defense in the NFL, and the scheme was a little bit better. But if you can make some of these adjustments, and if you can figure things out during the bye week, the talent is there for this defense to turn things around. So it hasn't been horrible, but for Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow, they're playing pitch and catch out there. I mean, it's throwing a beach ball into the damn ocean right now. It's just way too easy. No resistance for opposing offenses right now. And if Steve Wilks can't get this figured out with this defensive line, this defense, then those are some of the problems that Richard Sherman is talking about. Because you look at this defense right here. I mean, Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Chase Young, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga. A couple of changes that the Niners need to make for me. Maybe you go 5-man front a little bit. Maybe it's less twists and stunts. Maybe it's just bull rushes to get after the quarterback. And if you have that 5-man rush, maybe you're able to get home a little bit more. Bench Isaiah Oliver. Let me see more from Jair Brown. A couple of things that San Francisco can do here. But the coverage for the Niners has just been way too soft. In Week 8, Joe Burrow only threw into tight coverage 9.4% of the time. That's when a defender is within 5 to 9 yards. That was the 5th lowest mark in Week 8. And then the week previously against Minnesota, Kirk Cousins threw into tight window coverage 6.7% of the time. That was the 2nd lowest mark in Week 7. Now, with Richard Sherman, a lot of people have been in the comment section here. I've seen some people on Twitter, now known as X, talking about Sherman being the defensive coordinator for San Francisco. That's not going to happen, right? He said the answers, Sherman did, are in the building, as Kyle said. I would do my best if asked, but there is no world where they would ever or should ever pass over the incredible men that are in that building to hire someone with no coaching experience in the middle of the season. While I'm flattered by the support and belief from the faithful, I trust John and Kyle to find the solutions to the issues and get the defense back on track. I know that a lot of people rip Kyle Shanahan. We'll talk about him in a bit, as well as John Lynch. But look, they've missed on a couple of picks, but San Francisco has been to the NFC Championship game in 3 of the last 4 years. And all you can ask from your head coach, front office, ownership, and general manager is if you're trying to title chase every single year, you're trying to get championships back in the building and get those trophies back in the building and get that 6th Lombardi. San Francisco's clearly doing that. Like trading for Chase Young at the deadline goes to show you. They're trying, they're aggressive. Now it's up to the players and Wilks partially to do his job. As for Kyle Shanahan, he said the other day, I'm going to have a heart-to-heart with Steve Wilks. And yeah, he's going to have that heart-to-heart with Steve Wilks because things have to get figured out, and they have to get figured out very quickly. Coming up, Jaguars, Seahawks twice in 3 weeks, Philadelphia Eagles, Baltimore Ravens. If you don't get it figured out, what started as a 5-0 season can become increasingly disappointing. Speaking of that Chase Young trade real quick, John Lynch on why the Niners made the move. I wanted to see them address corner, but basically been doing this trade. They're thinking that if they get pressure on the quarterback and that pressure starts getting home, back end's job is going to be made a little bit easier because they're not going to have to hold up in coverage as long if the pass rush is actually sacking the quarterback. Lynch on Young said, we've had a nice track record, but it's tough because it's become an expectation that we're going to do something, and everyone is kind of looking at you through that trade deadline when you haven't done something. I'm glad we made that trade for Chase Young for the right reasons, not because we just felt like, hey, we got to do something. We didn't have to go do this. We just saw an opportunity, and we felt like we could stay true to who we want to be in terms of building through the draft with also adding a player who we felt could help us the rest of the year. He's going to be able to do that for the rest of the year. Chase Young's been one of the best defensive coordinators in football over the last couple of years. Tracy queued that up at a very good time. I want to round out the show talking about this dubious Kyle Shanahan record and these dubious Kyle Shanahan trends. So these photos making their rounds on social media. There's two that I want to talk about. The first, this one right here to my right. Kyle Shanahan, 1-31 record when trailing by 3+ points going into the fourth quarter. There's also another one. Kyle Shanahan is 0-37 when trailing by 8+ points going into the fourth quarter. Coming from behind in the NFL is very, very hard. This league is great. It's the best of the best, cream of the crop, as far as personnel, players-wise, but also coaches. Like the talent at the NFL level, even for shitty organizations, is really, really good. So let's start there. Coming from behind in the NFL is really hard. But when you're considered one of the most influential offensive minds in this generation, and you're called an offensive guru, and you're called a genius, two things that I have deemed Kyle Shanahan to be, my point in this conversation is that Kyle Shanahan should be able to mount some comebacks and score from time to time. Now, I also do think that this is the lack of having an elite quarterback type of trend, right? Andy Reid has Patrick Mahomes. No deficit is too large for Patrick Mahomes. If he's down by 14 going into the fourth quarter, we've seen him come back heroically in games like that. But, again, when you're an offensive guru, you're a genius, you should be able to come back from 3+ points and score some football games. And Shanahan ain't doing that. So I think that this is pretty telling because when the offense is taken out of its rhythm, and we've seen this the last 3 weeks where San Francisco has not scored more than 21 points after dropping 30 burgers at least 5 consecutive games to start the year, it's a little bit of an issue. I think that this offense, Shanahan, who sometimes is a little bit too stubborn, has to be more malleable with this offensive approach, strategy, and philosophy, and less predictable as an offense. Now, if you want to side with Shanahan, yes, it's a run-heavy offense for sure. He doesn't have a Patrick Mahomes. Never has. Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy, the two best quarterbacks that he's had with San Francisco. But again, it's not like a 3+ point deficit is all that great. We're talking about a field goal here, and Shanahan going almost over in those opportunities. And my take on Twitter was this, like I've always been a fan of Kyle Shanahan. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. This does not change that. Elite play caller, elite play designer. I've compared him to Andy Reid. It took Andy Reid 14 years in Philadelphia to get fired without winning a Super Bowl. Then he went to Kansas City. Finally has won 2. It took him that long to get a ring. So it's hard to win a Super Bowl in this league. And I've compared Shanahan's start with Reid's start because both of them very influential, creative offensive minds who couldn't get the job done. Getting to 3 NFC Championship games in 4 years is difficult. Building up this roster to the point that it is difficult. Assembling all these playmakers and elite talent. The NFL is hard, but Shanahan can be a little bit better, and I've been a fan of his, right? It's hard to do what he's been able to do. He's not without weaknesses, though. Like, he's blown multiple leads in critical spots. He's a little bit too conservative for my liking. The offense isn't as dangerous when playing from behind. It's more predictable, and they have more of a difficult time. In this 3-game losing streak, Fred Warner even said, we got to find a way to win these grimy games. Niners haven't been able to do that. And I understand. playing from behind in the NFL is arduous. But given how bright of an offensive mind he is and the peaks we've seen his offenses reach, he shouldn't be 1-31 when trailing by 3+ points going into the fourth quarter. Now, I know a lot of you as part of this conversation are saying, well, no coach has a good record and all coaches struggle when trying to come back in the fourth quarter. It's not a lie, right? Kyle Shanahan, 1-31, right? I think was that number when trailing by 3+ going into the fourth quarter since 2017. Sean McVay, 3-25. Harbaugh, 4-21. Belichick, 4-25. Not much of a gap if we're just talking numerically, right? But that's a couple of more victories at least as compared to Shanahan. And I know some people are like, everybody's killing Shanahan over this. It's not fair. The NFL is averaging a 13.3 winning percentage in that situation. Shanahan is at 3.3%. That's a pretty large gap there. And again, for the offensive mind that he is, the capabilities that we've seen and the peaks that we've seen this offense reach, it's just kind of inexcusable to have that bad of a record. And lastly, when we talk about McVay, we talk about Harbaugh, we talk about Bill Belichick, those other coaches, they've won Super Bowls, they've been to Super Bowls, they've sustained consistent success, and Kyle Shanahan's kind of been floating over 500. I know he had to rebuild San Francisco 3 of the last 4 years, NFC title game, but he can be better, and that's the topic, and that's the point of this conversation. Hope y'all enjoyed today's show, kind of a podcast-style video here on YouTube. I love being able to do this from time to time, just chopping it up. If you enjoyed today's show and you want more videos like this, I want you to type me down below in the comment section. We appreciate y'all. I'm going to go back and see if you want us to do more of these. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll be live later, here on this Thursday right here on the 49ers Report.